An estate such as Melrose held an assortment of livestock used for work and pleasure. This included finely bred riding and carriage horses that were stabled in this barn. The enslaved servants used oxen, mules, and draft horses to pull wagons and for plowing the vegetable gardens. Milk cows were a necessity, providing dairy products for the estate. Poultry was plentiful. Chickens, ducks, geese, turkey, and guinea fowl were given free roam of the grounds or kept in separate poultry houses and pens. All these animals would have been cared for by the enslaved people living in the nearby cabins. This white frame structure was originally referred to as a stable, where horses and mules were quartered, and some milk cows were kept. Feed and equipment were also stored here. In the 1900s, the Kellys owned one of the first automobiles in Natchez. They no longer needed riding or carriage horses. They operated a more intensive dairy operation on the estate, so they remodeled the barn to include stalls for milking cows on a larger scale. Servants living on the estate, such as Jane Johnson and Alice Sims, kept their own livestock on the back part of the property and sold their own dairy products in town. They used a separate, unpainted barn a short distance away. The carriage house is the most refined of the Melrose outbuildings. The front features classical architectural details similar to the mansion. It also has a fan-shaped louvered vent in the gable to provide airflow. It is strategically located near the stable, where carriage horses and draft horses or mules would be kept. The large double doors on the backside open wide. They allow for several carriages and wagons to be housed inside. Charles, an enslaved man, is identified in family letters and papers as the McMurrins' carriage driver. He held a post of great responsibility. He had to navigate unpaved and hazardous roads. Carriages frequently broke down. The large, powerful horses could become frightened and uncontrollable. An 1843 letter from Eliza Quinlan to her husband John described such an accident. Mr. McMurrin's horse ran off with his barouche yesterday morning and injured the carriage very much. Charles was on his way out to Melrose to take his mistress to church when the horses took fright and ran away. In 1857, a coachman met the McMurrin's son John and his new bride Allie at the river landing when their steamboat came in late one night, and he safely delivered them to Melrose. A man named William followed in a wagon with their baggage. Typically, upon returning from an outing, Charles would stop at the front door of the mansion to let out his passengers onto the carriage block. He would then use the teardrop-shaped gravel turnaround at the end of the driveway to return to the carriage house. There he would unharness and stable the horses.
I'm driving down an empty freeway, no waiting for the light to change. I'm seeing the sunrise behind me.
Many houses in the South had a separate kitchen building. This kept the heat and cooking smells away from the house. The Melrose kitchen was strategically located. It sat near the smokehouse, 2 cisterns, and the dirt path that led straight out to the large vegetable garden. Its nearness to the servant hall entrance into the back of the mansion aided the swift service of hot food to the mansion dining room. The Melrose kitchen featured 3 rooms upstairs and 3 rooms downstairs. The first floor contained the cooking kitchen. It also held a pantry and a possible dining room for the Melrose slaves. The cooks and some of the other household servants lived in the 3 upstairs rooms. An enslaved woman, Rachel, was the primary cook in 1850 and probably lived above the kitchen until 1864. Family letters mention another cook, Dicey, who was a slave on the nearby Clinton family estate, Plantaion. Mammy Helen sometimes cooked, and she too likely lived in an upstairs room in the kitchen or dairy building. Mammy Helen was initially a nurse to the McMurrin children.
It's beautiful. We've got about 85% of the original furnishings still in the house. Original to the first family that built it in the 1840s. It's pretty nice.
Now, I can't remember if I read about this one or if it was another one that was like $83,000 to build.
We're not sure how much it cost.
Okay, it might have been one of the other ones that I read.
We're not sure. We know he bought the land in 1841. He bought 133 acres for $5,000
Wow.
from his wife's uncle. That was 1841. He spent $3,000 on 600,000 bricks. But as far as the lumber and, we don't know. But, a lot of slave labor went into these houses.
Right.
So, and we just don't know. But completely different in the front than in the back. Yeah. But your original road came in just like y'all did. Came through that white gate, turned and came through the second gate, then followed this little hedge line right here, did this little teardrop loop, and then went right back in. So that's your original road. That road that's out there now, Melrose Avenue, was not there.
Okay.
The road stopped when you came in that first gate. So this was the end of the road back then. She talked about having an emerald green front lawn. This was all grass out here. Then we put the fence, the historic fence lines have all gone back in. Then that front field was a hay field. And the property actually extended across that road into those woods across the road.
Wow.
But you could have grass, you could have anything you wanted if you had the money, and these folks had the money. This was one of the wealthiest towns on the Mississippi River, and it was all because of cotton and slaves. This was a slave-based economy. The man that built it, John McMurrin, was an attorney. He was a lawyer here in town. His law practice brought him in about $30,000 a year, which in today's money is about $850,000. He marries into money. He married into the state Supreme Court justice's family. That's a pretty smart move for a new young attorney in town. With that marriage, he inherited a house, plantation, and 35 slaves. So not only is he making this money at the law practice, he's acquiring property, climbing that social ladder here in town. And he actually became one of the most prominent attorneys in the state of Mississippi in the 1840s. His law partner was John Quitman. Y'all heard of Quitman, Mississippi?
Mm-hmm.
He lived right down the street at Monmouth. Go out our driveway and take a right. It's right there on the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Their wives were first cousins. Their daughter marries into the Connor family that still has Linden right next door. And you start looking at all the original family trees, and they're just intertwined. It's amazing how they're all connected, just 2 and 3 ways over. But, it's just this upper class that was here, this upper 1% that lived like this. But this is how they showed it off. So, the house, the grounds, the outbuildings, all those dependency buildings, they're all original to the site, too, and they're actually older than the house. They built all those first. We started on the house about 1847. They're living here by 1849. Mom, dad, and 2 teenagers. So, it's pretty fast. We couldn't do it today by hand in 2 years.
So we're talking about out of the percentage of people in this area, only 1% was slave owners, I guess?
Not slave owners, this wealthy.
This wealthy. Okay.
You might have owned a slave, but you didn't own 300 or 2,000.
Yeah.
You might have owned one, something like that. But the slaves were expensive. This was the second largest slave market in the entire United States. Have y'all seen some signs that say Forks of the Road?
Mm-hmm.
Y'all seen those signs? That's where the old slave market was. And where we're standing right now, it's not a half a mile just right down the street. They just turned it over to us. It used to be about 18 acres. Now there's just a little bit piece of land left with some great outdoor exhibits. So if y'all get a chance, stop by there today and see that. New Orleans was the largest, and we were the second largest. So, yeah. But Mr. McMurrin would end up owning about 10,000 acres of cotton, 2 plantations in Mississippi, 2 in Louisiana, 1 up in Arkansas, and about 325 slaves. 25 slaves were here on the estate. Now, this is not a plantation. There weren't any plantations here. This is just the town where they all lived, and then the plantations were out up and down the river. But here, 10 were house slaves. They did nothing but work inside this house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then the other 15 took care of the outside. So you had slaves out here cutting the grass by hand. You had gardeners, carriage drivers, blacksmiths, all that were out here.
So they would be the ones that lived in those back
In the
cabins.
2 back cabins, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the one on the right in the back, it's open. There's a wonderful exhibit in there too, so check that out. And then the carriage house and stable back this way, they're open too.
Now, did I read where he was in the legislature?
He was in the Mississippi State House of Representatives.
Yep, my dad was too.
They were
So-
big into politics.
Yeah.
You know, in the early 1800s, this is still a very young country. These folks were big into politics, very patriotic. Yep, he was in the State House of Representatives. Mr. Quitman was governor of the state.
Okay.
So yeah, he was big time. I mean, they were the politics. They controlled everything.
And this is the same furniture?
About 85%, yeah. Yep. So we've got about 85% of the original furnishings all throughout this house. It was when they sold it in 1866. Their plans were to move back to the north, where he's originally from, Pennsylvania, and they just took a few personal things and sold the house and everything in it. Now the second family buys it, and they made the decision not to get rid of anything, and they kept it. They could have gotten all new furniture for every room, but they realized what they had, and they kept it. And they owned it the longest. They owned it till 1976. So yeah, which is kind of neat. But a private home up until 1985. Lived in, worked in, played in house. Yeah, which is kind of neat.
Till
1985.
no kidding.
That was not that long ago.
No.
Yeah, National Park Service bought it in 1990.
I'm not going to tell you how old I was.
Yep.
1990, I was a
Yep.
junior in high school.
Yep.
17.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Which is kind of cool. This is the formal parlor, not the most expensive room in the house. Not used every day. Daughter's wedding, 1856, took place in there when she married into the Connor family next door at Lincoln. But the best and the latest. And here you had gold leaf wallpaper on the walls. That's going to be the first room you see if you're coming into the house. That's where you're going to get your impression of their wealth. From seeing everything in that room. And everything in this house, this bottom floor, is all for show. This is not your living area. The second floor is your living area. But they did use this dining room every day. This family sat down at least twice a day for meals at this table. China on the table was purchased by Mrs. McMurray when they did the Grand Tour of Europe in 1854. So that's one of her little souvenirs she brought back from that trip.
I don't even know if this is going to turn out. It's probably too dark in here.
It might not be. You'd be surprised. Now that big fan up over the table, that's called a punka. Y'all tour around some more houses today, you'll see these, but they won't be this large. This one is twice the size. It's hand carved. It's mahogany. Get your attention as soon as you walk in this front hallway. And it's actually operated by a slave child that stands over to the left and pulls a rope. That moves it back and forth really slow and creates a breeze, just like a ceiling fan does today. Hopefully it's going to cool the air in the room a little bit.
That is gorgeous.
I was just about to ask, how does it work?
Yep. That slave child is actually in training to be a house slave, but not necessarily here. They could be taken right down the road and put on that auction block and sold at any time.
Like maybe 8, 9, or even younger than that.
Yeah, maybe younger than that, yeah.
No.
But
House slaves, were they mostly women or men and women?
not necessarily. They had two butlers, Charles and Marcellus, that were here. Yeah. Yeah, just depends on your skill.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't believe the second family didn't change anything around.
I know, it's crazy. Yeah, I mean, they could have, like I said, gotten rid of every stick of furniture in here. Yeah, yeah. Next room, family parlor. They would gather in this room in the afternoon for tea. They'd also gather in here in the evening. Mrs. McMurray loved to entertain her guests playing the piano. And then up over the piano, if you can kind of peek around, that's her portrait when she's about 15 years old. And like I said, her father was State Supreme Court Justice Edward Turner. So they had money and wealth and power too. When he married Mrs. McMurray, the house he received from her dad was called Holly Hedges, and it's on the corner of Washington and Wall downtown. They lived there while they were building this place out here, out in the country. Which back then it was.
I love those pocket doors.
They're
That's
beautiful.
original too.
Yep, old Paris vases.
I've got some vases that was my, I guess she would be my great aunt.
Yeah.
And my mom says that they're probably about 160 years old. So
You know where they're made?
I don't. I need to
Stamp
look
on
and see.
everything, yeah.
I'm not sure they're.
But this is actually, we call it the family library. Now, he did have a law office downtown on Wall Street, which is over by the courthouse, right in the middle of town. But he might have been back here working on a court case, doing paperwork for one of the plantations. We call it the library because, of course, because of these bookcases. You see this one, there's another one that matches it behind the door. And these were made in this room just for these books. So this is actually some Natchez built furniture. Now one of their most treasured books is up on the 5th shelf, that little thin red book right in the middle, almost with the gold leafing. You see that one? That is Lay of the Last Minstrel, written by Sir Walter Scott. Sir Walter Scott wrote about Melrose Abbey over in Scotland. That's where the name of this house comes from. On that big grand tour they took in 1854, Melrose Abbey was one of the places they went to visit. Mr. McMurrin is of Scottish descent. Sir Walter Scott and his dog are over there on the mound. But yeah, that's where the name of the house comes from. All these houses have names. Yeah. It's kind of neat. So how long am I going to be in town? Those 10 house slaves would hear the bells. They would even know which room to go to and who was being called by the tone of each bell. They're each a little bit different. How pretty. So this next room is her daughter's bedroom, Mary Elizabeth. She's the one that was married in the green room downstairs. 1854, she married into the Connor family next door at Linden. She would live through childbirth 3 times, had 3 children, but 2 of those children would pass away. Not really sure what from, but cholera, dysentery, things we don't think about today were very common back then. And she passed away in this room in 1864. We're not real sure what was wrong with her. The letters talk about her being very sick and weak and feeble toward the end of her life, slaves having to carry her up the stairs a lot of times at night just to go to bed. They say when she died, she had the mind of a child and the body of an old woman at 29 years old. And there's really no way of knowing what that was. But 1864, they're still bleeding and leeching and treating you with cyanide and mercury and arsenic and stuff we don't do today.
That may have been a problem.
She's probably lucky to have seen 29 when you think about it. But yeah, very archaic compared to us. But that was modern technology. You're going to do what you got to do to save your child. Same thing today. But 160 years from now, they're going to talk about how primitive we are. We're no different than them. And sickness did not care if you were rich or poor. Next room set up for the grandchildren, nursery. There's that pallet full of toys that would have been out here on this floor. But they did have 7 grandchildren. 3 of those would pass away, but 4 did survive. So there's descendants out there scattered all over, which is kind of nice. We're starting to get things back now from descendants, like this doll in the rocking chair, Miss Roosevelt. She recently came home to us, and she belonged to that daughter that passed away. So it's nice for her to come home.
That is very nice.
It's like somebody said the other day, kids today don't want this old stuff. And they don't. They want the modern stuff, and they're minimalists. And
I'm the same way, and my mom keeps everything. Everything.
Yeah. Next room upstairs, this was actually another bedroom that we don't have the pieces for. Maybe one day we will. But what we have in here is an 1850 shower, bathtub, and flush toilet. Indoor plumbing. Pretty fancy. This was not in this house. They had nothing like it over here. This came out of another house here in town. Y'all may see Dunleith while y'all riding around today. This came out of Dunleith. They took it out and gave it to us. All we had over here was this little tub on the floor that you'd actually sit in. There'd be a sheet there that you'd sit on. You'd pull that sheet up around you, and then the slaves would pour water over you, and that'd be your bath. They did not bathe like we do today. Very, very simple, as needed.
Pour the sheet, just pull it, didn't even scrub or anything. Goodness. Well, I don't know what's good that did.
I actually thought bathing was unhealthy. Washed all the good stuff off. And also amazing too how much light comes in just opening.
Yeah.
Back then everything would have been your doors, your windows, your shutters. That bottom left, the visitor center where you guys checked in a while ago, that was the kitchen. The whole bottom floor, that was the kitchen. They never brought the kitchen in. I mean, it's still in, 1985, the kitchen was still out there. They never brought it in the house. Bottom right, laundry and dairy. And then upstairs on both of those buildings, that's where those 10 house slaves lived. Then beyond the trees, 2 more cabins, 15 more live back there. The one on the right's open. Y'all go in that one. But these trees weren't here. None of this was here. It didn't look like this. This was all dirt. This is your slave area back here. You're not going to landscape that. Here's your work area. You had a big turkey yard over to the right, big chicken yard over to the left. Look completely different than it does today. That parking lot where y'all parked times 2 was a vegetable garden. There was just a little dirt path that led out to it. But yeah, completely different out here. We just restored the fruit orchard a few years ago, about 7 years ago. figs, pears, peaches, apples, and cherries. Put in about 25 trees. That's exactly what they were growing. So we redid that. And then around to the front, around this way, it's beautiful out there. Y'all walk out there. That's your formal gardens. That's where you took your company and your guests on your strolls. You didn't bring it back here with
So they did that little hedge row covering all of it.
Yep. They had tried it extensively when they built this place. She had seen the use of hedges and fences over in Europe and came back and said, yeah, there's your bells. There's your bells up there. Each a little bit different. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Just a little bit different. And they would know.
Now, what would be, is that like a restroom?
That is the slave hallway. They did not use the front or back door or the inside stairs. They had their own separate area. And since it's just y'all, when we come back down, we'll go out that way. I'll show you that area. You have to fly over here. But I'll show you. Yeah, if you were company in this house, you rarely saw a house slave unless it was, Charles or Marcellus. They'd be called to a specific room and right back underneath here in the hallway. They'd be called in.
Now, there was normally no furniture or anything?
There was more furniture out here.
Okay.
More furniture out here. This is your living area. There's no company in the house that will get here on this level. And this is kind of like your den. There was a big pallet out here filled with toys for the grandchildren. There was a gaming table, more chairs, stuff, a little more lived in than it is today. But yeah, we don't have stuff out here. We'll start with this front right bedroom, which is the master bedroom. But this is your den.
It's a very open floor plan.
Yep.
I guess you had to to keep it.
Everything had a reason. Everything had a purpose. Big open rooms, high ceilings. You're actually facing west. You're facing the river. So if you get a breeze, it just blows through the house. Yeah. If you get a breeze. She wrote once in her diary that it was 90 degrees in the innermost part of the house. And that was probably this back hallway back here.
But I can remember growing up and staying outside all summer long.
Yeah.
And the heat didn't bother me at all.
No.
But now,
No.
oh,
You're spoiled, right?
yeah, it's very small.
If air conditioning had been around, they would have had it. But this is mom and dad's room. This is the master bedroom. The little smaller beds are called day beds. That's where they rested in the afternoon. Because once you got out of that big bed in the morning, the house slaves had already come in once and made it up. And you didn't dare get back in it again and mess it up. So you had these little smaller beds for that afternoon nap of convenience that you have in the early evenings. And she did spend a lot of time up here over the corner at her writing desk, writing letters, writing in her diary. Luckily, we have a lot of those because we've learned a lot just reading those. She loved to sit up here and listen to her canary sing in her cage. And she was up here one day, it was May 10th, 1856, and looked out that window and counted 56 magnolia blossoms on the tree her husband had planted for her a couple of years earlier on their anniversary. She said it was 20 feet tall. When y'all go back out, look at that magnolia tree. It is taller than this house. It's just massive. And just that little notation tells us, that's part of the original landscape, which is kind of cool that we've got that. But yeah.
In the pot underneath the bed?
Chamber pot. That's your chamber pot you'd use in the night. You just pull a rope, turn a crank, one of the bells on the back would ring, the house slaves would come in, take it out. During the day, there was a 16-hole outhouse outside. They'd use that during the day.
A 16?
Yep.
Oh.
Still there. Still there. The modern bathroom today, but if you walk around to the back, there's still 4 holes that are there. Look how grand my house is. Look how grand all my outbuildings are.
Yeah.
It's like somebody builds a big fancy house today, same thing. Same thing. This next bedroom is actually their son's bedroom, John Jr. It is a little dark in here this morning. This room was redone for his wife, Allie. When she married John Jr., Mrs. McMurrin was worried that she was going to be overwhelmed by this lifestyle. She was not part of this upper class here in Natchez. She was a dairy farmer's daughter. She's a farmer's daughter. So she had this whole bedroom redone for Allie so she'd feel loved and welcomed when she moved into Melrose. And they would eventually take over one of his dad's plantations called Riverside, which was about 2,800 acres, big house, 35 slaves, and they ran that plantation, which is a nice little farm when you think about it for a farm girl. She actually adapted fairly quickly to this lifestyle, and they would have 4 children down there. But up over the fireplace, you see Melrose Abbey in Scotland. And to the right of the fireplace, y'all see that red rope that hangs down from the ceiling? That goes to one of those bells on the back side of the house.
Wow.
And I'll show them to you in just a minute. We'll go out there. If you needed something 24/7, you just pull a rope, turn a crank, one of the bells would ring.